The blood on her face is not her own. Brynja is 26 years old, and she can feel it drying in the cold wind. Can tastes copper when her lips crack open. Can smell the smoke from her burning village mixing with the iron salt scent of the massacre that ended 3 hours ago. She was, until sunrise this morning, Queen of the Nervi, wife of King Bodo-Ognatus, mother of 2 sons. Priestess of the sacred grove, the most powerful woman in a nation of warriors who had never been conquered. Now she kneels in the mud beside 600 other women, her royal torque ripped from her neck. Her ceremonial robes torn to expose her body to the February wind. Her wrists bound behind her back with rope that cuts deeper every time she moves. Around her, Roman soldiers move through the prisoners with the efficiency of men who have done this many times before, separating the young from the old, the beautiful from the plain, the valuable from the disposable. And they are coming for her. Before we go deeper, I need to know where you're watching from, because it genuinely amazes me that this story, buried for 2,000 years, now reaches every corner of the world. Drop a comment below. She knows they are coming because a Roman officer has been watching her since the sorting began. He stands apart from the common soldiers, his armor marking him as a Legato Sa Legion commander, one of the most powerful men in the Roman military hierarchy. His face is handsome in the way that predators are handsome. Sharp, composed, utterly without mercy. He has not spoken to her. He has not approached. He has simply watched. And his watching is worse than anything the common soldiers might do, because it means she is not just valuable, she is being evaluated for purposes she does not yet understand. This is Gaul in 54 BC, in the frozen territories north of Rome's expanding empire, where Julius Caesar's legions have been carving through tribal nations for 4 years. The Nervi people were considered the bravest of the Belgi, the fiercest warriors Caesar had faced. They had nearly destroyed 2 of his legions in an earlier battle. And Caesar had written in his own chronicles that they refused to negotiate, refused to submit, refused to accept any terms except complete independence. So when Rome finally broke them, when Legatus, Gaius, Cornelius, Scipio led the punitive expedition that burned their villages and slaughtered their armies, there was a particular thoroughness to the destruction. A message being sent not just to the Nervi, but to every tribe watching from beyond the frontier. The officer Scipio begins walking toward Brynja now. This one, his Latin is crisp, educated, the accent of Roman aristocracy. The queen, bring her to my tent. Have her cleaned, but not clothed. I want to examine what we've captured. A soldier moves to grab her. She does not resist. Resistance here means death, and death means abandoning her sons who are somewhere in this chaos, who might still be alive if she can find a way to protect them. But as she is lifted to her feet, she sees something that stops her heart. Her husband's head, mounted on a Roman spear, displayed at the edge of the prisoner compound, where every captured Nervian can see what happened to their king. Bodo-Ognatus is dead. The man she has loved since childhood, the father of her children. The king who swore to protect their people dead and displayed like a trophy for Roman entertainment. She does not scream, she does not weep. She locks the grief somewhere deep inside, somewhere it cannot interfere with what she must do next. Because now she understands something that changes everything. She is the last authority of the Nervi. With Bodo-Ognatus dead, she is not merely a captured queen. She is the vessel of her nation's sovereignty, the keeper of its sacred knowledge, the only person alive who knows where the tribe's treasury is hidden, where the Druids concealed the artifacts that must never fall into Roman hands, where her sons were sent when the battle turned against them. The Romans do not know this yet. They see only a queen, valuable as a trophy, useful as a hostage, entertaining as a conquest. They do not know what they have actually captured. And Brynja intends to use that ignorance as a weapon. What you are about to learn has been systematically excluded from the histories that celebrate Rome's conquest of the barbarian north. The Roman historians who documented Caesar's Gallic Wars focused on battles and strategies, on the genius of military organization, on the civilizing mission that supposedly justified the conquest of peoples who had lived freely for centuries. They recorded casualty figures in the hundreds of thousands, entire nations destroyed, populations enslaved, cultures erased from the earth. But they did not record what happened to the women, not in detail, not honestly. Because what Roman legions did to the wives of defeated tribal chiefs was designed to be unspeakable. When a tribe was conquered, its women became property of the Roman state. The disposition of that property followed a specific hierarchy based on perceived value. Common women farmers, wives, craftsmen's daughters were sold in bulk to slave traders, who transported them to markets throughout the empire. They became agricultural laborers, domestic servants, prostitutes in roadside establishments. Above them were skilled women weavers, brewers, women with craft knowledge that made them more valuable. These were sold individually at significant premiums. Above them were noble women wives of warriors and minor chiefs, whose status in the tribal hierarchy translated into perceived quality. These women were often kept by officers as personal servants or concubines, or sold to wealthy Romans who wanted exotic companions. And at the top were queens and princesses, the wives and daughters of tribal kings. The highest value captures, the trophies that demonstrated Roman power most dramatically. Queens had special value because they represented the complete subjugation of the defeated nation. A queen kneeling in chains demonstrated that even the highest status in barbarian society meant nothing against Roman might. Queens were displayed in triumphs, the ceremonial processions through Rome that celebrated military victories. They were given to important men as gifts, demonstrating the giver's access to rare treasures. They were sometimes kept alive for years, their continued existence serving as ongoing proof of Rome's dominance. But queens also faced specific horrors that other captives were spared. Because queens represented their nation's sovereignty, their degradation had to be complete and public. They were stripped of all markers of former status, jewelry, clothing, symbols of rank. They were renamed with Latin names that erased their identities. They were forced to perform acts of submission that demonstrated their acceptance of Roman authority. And they were made available to their captors in ways designed to maximize humiliation. The special entertainment, as it was euphemistically called in military correspondence that survived in fragmentary form, was well documented in sources that Roman historians later tried to suppress. Captured queens were often assigned to officers' quarters for hospitality purposes, a term that meant systematic, intimate use by whoever the commanding officer wished to reward. They might serve dozens of men over weeks or months, their royal status adding novelty to what would otherwise be ordinary abuse. This was the fate Brenia was trying to avoid as she entered Scipio's tent. The tent was larger than the house Brenia had grown up in. Canvas walls enclosed a space containing furniture, carpets, bronze lamps. A writing desk covered with maps and documents saw the apparatus of Roman military administration transported across hundreds of miles so that a commander could maintain civilized comfort while destroying civilizations. Scipio circled her slowly, examining her the way he might examine a horse he was considering purchasing. "The Queen of the Nervi," he said, "wife of Bodoagnatus, who killed 3,000 of my men before we brought him down. Mother of 2 sons who have apparently vanished, we're still searching." He stopped in front of her, his eyes meeting hers. "And priestess of your people's sacred grove. That's the detail that interests me most." She said nothing. Let him talk. Let him reveal what he knew and what he didn't. "The Druids performed their rituals in that grove," he continued. "They kept records there, artifacts, treasures accumulated over centuries. My scouts found the grove, or what was left of it, after your people burned it. But they found nothing of value, just ash and bones." Still, she said nothing. "Which means the Druids moved their treasures before we arrived. And the only people who would know where they moved them are the Druids themselves, who died defending the grove, or the king, who is decorating a spear outside, or the queen." He smiled. You? I am a woman, she said, her Latin flawless. The Druids did not share their secrets with women. The Druids made exceptions for queens who were also priestesses. Your people's own traditions confirm this. You were initiated into mysteries that ordinary women were forbidden to know. He was well informed, too well informed. Someone had told him things that only a Nervian would know. What do you want? She asked. I want the Druid treasures. I want the tribal treasury that your husband hid before the battle. I want the location of your sons, who are heirs to a throne that no longer exists, but who might still be useful as hostages. He paused. I want you to cooperate willingly, rather than requiring persuasion. And if I refuse, then I persuade you. There are methods that work on almost everyone, given enough time and creativity. I would prefer not to damage you, and damaged queens are more valuable, but I will if necessary. This was the moment. The fulcrum on which everything would turn. What do you offer, Brenya? Said slowly, in exchange for cooperation. The question surprised him. She saw it in the slight shift of his expression. He had expected pleading or defiance or silence. He had not expected negotiation. You are not in a position to negotiate. Everyone is always in a position to negotiate. I have information you want. You have power over my survival and my children's survival. That is the basis for a transaction. The transaction is simple. You tell me what I want to know, or I hurt you until you tell me. That transaction destroys the value of what I'm offering. Torture produces unreliable information. People say whatever will stop the pain. If you want accurate locations for treasures and children, you need my genuine cooperation, not words extracted through suffering. Scipio studied her with new interest. You've thought about this? I had 3 hours in the mud watching your soldiers sort prisoners. That is a long time to think. A long silence settled between them. Outside, the sounds of the camp continued, orders being shouted, prisoners weeping, the routine business of conquest moving forward with mechanical precision. Inside the tent, a negotiation was beginning that neither of them fully understood yet. My sons' lives, Brenia said finally. Not their freedom, I know, that is impossible, but their lives. Assigned to household service somewhere, they will be fed and sheltered and permitted to grow to adulthood. That might be arranged, and my own life. Not freedom, not comfort, but life. Assigned to purposes that do not involve the special entertainment that I know awaits captured queens. Scipio was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted, less predatory, more businesslike. If your information proves accurate, I can guarantee your son's survival. I can assign them to my own household, where they will be treated as valued property rather than disposable labor. And me. You are more complicated. A queen of the Nervi is a significant trophy. There are expectations about how such trophies are displayed and used. He paused. But there might be alternatives depending on how valuable your information proves to be. I need more than might be. I need specific commitments before I reveal anything. You are negotiating as if you have leverage. You don't. I have the only accurate information about treasures that represent years of your soldiers' pay. I have knowledge about my son's location that your search parties will not find without my help. I have the ability to give you true information or false information, and you will not know the difference until your men have wasted weeks following wrong directions. She met his eyes steadily. I have leverage. The question is whether you are intelligent enough to recognize it. What happened next would determine not just Brenia's fate, but the fate of knowledge that had survived for centuries. Resistance networks that still operated in shadows, and 2 young boys who represented the last hope of a destroyed nation. Scipio laughed not cruelly, but with genuine amusement. The laugh of someone who had encountered something unexpected and found himself strangely impressed. Tell me about the treasury, he said finally. If your information is accurate, we will discuss terms for everything else. And Brenia began to talk, but she did not tell him the truth. She told him a version of the truth accurate enough to be verified in the short term, inaccurate enough to waste his time and resources in the long term. The treasury was hidden, yes, but not where she said it was. The direction was right. The distance was wrong. By the time his men discovered the deception, she would have created opportunities that did not currently exist. She was playing a game that Scipio did not realize had begun. A game that would last not hours, but years. A game with stakes far higher than one woman's survival. Because what Brina understood, what the Romans who processed thousands of captured women never understood, was that intelligence and patience could sometimes accomplish what weapons could not. That systems designed to break people could be navigated by people who studied those systems carefully enough. That even in complete powerlessness, small choices could accumulate into large consequences. Over the next 12 years, Brina would become exactly what the Romans thought they wanted: a cooperative consultant. A bridge between Roman administration and Gallic populations. A woman who had accepted her fate and made peace with her captors. She would learn Roman politics, Roman law, Roman methods of acquiring and exercising power. Her sons would grow up Roman in education, but Nervian in identity, taught in secret the language and history that Rome tried to erase, and she would wait. Wait for the moment when Scipio, now a provincial governor, would need exactly the kind of help she could provide. Wait until she had access to information that could destroy him. Wait until the Druid networks she had never betrayed were strong enough to use what she could give them. The tax revolt that erupted in Scipio's province 12 years after the Nervi were destroyed was devastating. The resistance anticipated every Roman move, ambushed every patrol, targeted every supply line. Scipio was recalled to Rome in disgrace, the governor who had lost control of a province that had been pacified for decades. His career was ruined. He died years later in obscurity, never understanding how his carefully planned response had failed so completely. He never knew that the middle-aged Roman consultant who had served on his staff, the Gallic specialist who seemed so cooperative, so helpful, was the young queen who had knelt in mud, watching her husband's head mounted on a spear, making calculations that would take more than a decade to execute. Brina lived to 53. She died in a small house on the Italian coast, surrounded by grandchildren who knew their grandmother's story, who understood where their blood came from, who carried forward the knowledge that Rome had tried to erase. Her last words were in the Nervian language, the tongue she had not spoken aloud in decades. The language that survived because she survived. She had not saved her nation. The Nervi were destroyed, their lands repopulated with Roman settlers who knew nothing of what had existed before. But she had not let them destroy her either. Not completely. Not in the ways that mattered most. What Roman soldiers did to the wives of defeated tribal chiefs was unspeakable. But some of those wives found ways to speak back, not with words, but with patience, with intelligence. With the slow accumulation of small resistances that eventually became something larger. They learned the conqueror's methods and turned those methods against them. They became dangerous in ways Rome never anticipated, because Rome saw only captives where survival required them to see enemies who had not yet revealed themselves. Remember Brina as a victim, not as a hero, but as something more complicated and more real. A woman who made impossible choices in impossible circumstances, who achieved outcomes that were neither complete victory nor complete defeat, who understood that sometimes survival itself is a form of resistance. The blood on her face was not her own, but the choices she made in the hours and years that followed, those were entirely hers.